Nicola Sturgeon, there's a lot of free stuff in your manifesto. How can you afford it?
Well, we set out the medium-term financial strategy in January. The Scottish Government published that, and that took account of the independent forecasts of the Scottish Fiscal Commission, the OBR, the assumptions about growth in our budget over the next 5 years. It gave 3 scenarios: high, medium and low, and we very cautiously costed our manifesto slightly under the medium forecast. So it's based on the growth principally in the devolved tax revenues as our economy starts to recover.
But you can do without the Barnett formula or without the block grant, could you?
Well, interestingly, when you look at the medium-term financial strategy, which is published for everybody to see, devolved tax revenues are estimated to grow by about 20%.
The you overall, can do without the extra funding, could you?
Let me finish. The overall budget is estimated to grow by only 14%, and the reason for that is that the Barnett formula part of our funding is growing more slowly. That's what's holding budget growth overall back. But, you know, let's nail this point, Colin. The money that we get through the Barnett formula is not money that is given to Scotland as some kind of favour. It comes either from the taxes that we pay in Scotland and send first to the Treasury in London only to get back, or it is Scotland's share of the massive borrowing that the UK government is currently undertaking, rightly so, to help us through the COVID pandemic.
One of the big new free promises is for dental care. Dentists are quite concerned about that, though, because they're worried that it could restrict the free treatments that they give. Also, they're worried that it could be seen as a bit of a middle-class giveaway, given that people on benefits get free dental care anyway.
We'll talk to the dental profession as we roll out that policy and implement it. I think it's really important to stress that those are worries that will not be well-founded, but we'll talk to the dental profession about making sure that we avoid any unintended consequences. But
why haven't you spoken to them already? They say you've cancelled meetings with them in the run-up to the election.
Well, I'm not aware of that. If that's the case, I apologise for that. There's lots of people we meet. The government, obviously, this is a political manifesto, but the government has ongoing consultation and dialogue with professions in the NHS and across other sectors as well. But can I complete this point, that the importance of this, it's partly about completing that restoration of the NHS to its founding principle, free health care at the point of need. But it's also part of a bigger shift here. If we take away barriers to people accessing healthcare, then they will get that healthcare earlier, and it helps us shift the balance to more preventative care and treatment. Like in the year before the pandemic, almost 4,000 people ended up in accident and emergency departments because they had dental health problems. Now, perhaps not all, but some of those problems might have been averted if people had gone to the dentist earlier, and perhaps cost was a barrier for many people.
You mentioned the pandemic. We're a year on from the outbreak of COVID, 10,000 deaths. Do you think as many people in Scotland would have been vaccinated if we'd been independent?
Yes.
How can you say that, given that if you look at the other independent countries that you mentioned during your manifesto launch the other day, Ireland, Denmark, we've almost vaccinated 3 times more than them?
Because this notion that the UK has only been able to procure the vaccine and vaccinate so many people because they are out of the EU is not borne out, firstly, by the reality that the UK was still in the transition period, that therefore subject to all of the rules and regulations of the EU when it procured the vaccine. European countries are able, if they so wish, particularly during health emergencies, to procure in the way that the UK did.
But no other EU countries even close to where Scotland and the rest of the UK
Scotland
is.
could have chosen to procure the way it thought was best. There is absolutely no evidential basis to say that Scotland would not have vaccinated as many people as we've vaccinated right now had
Except
we been
if you look at every other European country. Look at Ireland, for example. They're planning to try and get all their over 70s done by the end of next month. We all have done most of our over 40s by then.
Scotland and a Scottish government would have chosen to procure the vaccine in the way that they thought was most effective and efficient. Now, you're just basically sort of plucking this out of thin air and saying, but if Scotland had been independent, we wouldn't have been able to do that. Actually, a Scottish government would have been able to make the choices. And I'm saying, yes, I think we would, as long as we had a sensible Scottish government like the one we've got just now and the one that I hope is re-elected come May the 6th.
So you're saying that Ireland, other EU countries that you've spoken about, Denmark, Norway, they've done it wrong. They've not been sensible.
I'm not making a comment on any other country. You're doing that. I'm talking about Scotland. I'm talking about the decisions we've taken, the decisions that I think, had we been in government as an independent country, we would have been able to take. At the heart of your argument, which a lot of politicians who were on the Brexit side of the EU referendum make, is that the UK would have been prevented, and they're by extension, any other country in the EU would have been prevented from procuring the vaccine in the way the UK did, had the UK still been in the EU. Now, the point I'm making is the UK was in the transition period. It was still subject to all the rules, so that point clearly is completely false.
Let's move on then. 260,000 children living in poverty in Scotland today. That's up 50,000 since you became First Minister.
So child poverty is far too high in Scotland, as it is in every other nation in the UK. Of course, child poverty in Scotland is the lowest of the 4 UK
But it's up 50,000 on your watch.
It's up 50,000 because of welfare cuts that have been introduced at Westminster. Most of the independent commentators on child poverty say very clearly that the reason child poverty has risen in Scotland and across the UK is because of welfare cuts. But what we've done over the past parliamentary term is put in place a game-changing, that's the word of child poverty campaigners, policy to do something about that. The Scottish Child Payment, which is already up and running, paying £10 a week for children up to age 6 in low-income families, about to be extended to children up to the age of 16, and if we are re-elected, doubled in the next term of Parliament. So we have this situation in Scotland where we're trying to lift children out of poverty with the powers we've got, but the powers that still lie at Westminster are being used in a way that plunge more children into poverty.
You're going to double it by the end of the Parliament. That misses the interim target set out in the Child Poverty Act of cutting it by 18% by 2023-24. You're missing your own target.
We've said in the manifesto we'll do it over the term of the Parliament, but of course we'll set out in budgets.
It says actually on page 28 by the end of the Parliament.
Yes, but whether we choose to do that and how we
so when are you
phase
going to do
that.
It? Are you going to do it in time to meet that 18% cut by 23-24?
These are statutory targets. I think, I'll be corrected if I'm wrong on this, if this has changed in the last wee while, but we're the only government in the UK that still has statutory child poverty targets. So we are bound by law and we will do what it takes to meet those. And that's the point I was going to make. We will set out the phasing of that policy when we put forward budgets and a programme for government if we're re-elected on May the 6th.
Very briefly, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation says that you could actually hit the 90% target for 2030 right now if you put the child payment up to £40.
Look,
why don't you just do that and actually stop child poverty immediately?
Your first question to me, Colin, was your manifesto's full of giveaways. How are you going to pay for them? I've set out...
But wouldn't that be a pretty good one if you could actually eradicate child poverty and you could do it now?
Well, I think in what we set out, we will lift children out of poverty and we'll meet our statutory targets.
Yes, you'll lift 47,000 out according to your plan. You could lift 240,000 out.
We will set out through, as we have done in our manifesto, the action on the child payment, the free school meals, the
but you could do
range
it quicker.
of
you could lift them
policies.
out of poverty quicker. You're just not going to do that.
No, that's not the case. We're putting forward a costed, affordable plan that is going to lift children out of poverty. The child payment in its current form, let alone in its doubled form, is something that no other government in the UK has in place. And that's the determination we have to lift children out of poverty and make child poverty a thing of the past.
You're going to recruit 3,500 teachers and classroom assistants. How many of each?
Again, we'll set, so over the pandemic, we recruited 1,400 additional teachers and 200...
But this is what we're looking at in the future. You're talking about 3,500. How many of each?
Well, we haven't made that calculation yet because we will talk to local authorities.
Have you spoken to the EIS about it?
We will talk to the EIS, we'll talk to local authorities. I was going to try to help you with the answer, though, if you give me a moment to do so, to give you a rough balance. Over the pandemic, over the last parliamentary term, we've employed 3,000 more teachers. In the pandemic, 1,400 more teachers and 200 classroom assistants. So that's perhaps a rough idea of the balance we will strike there. But yes, we will discuss with teaching unions, we'll discuss with local authorities. Local authorities, of course, who are the actual employers of teachers and classroom assistants. But we are making clear that the funding is there to build on the 3,000 extra teachers we've recruited over this Parliament to recruit 3,500 teachers and classroom assistants. Now, we'll also want local authorities to have some flexibility to decide what the balance is that they think works best in their own situations.
In your last manifesto, you said you wanted to substantially close the poverty-related attainment gap. You could have done better than that, couldn't you? Yeah,
I think we probably could have done better, and I want us to do better. We were making and are making real progress here. We would have made more progress had COVID not upended every aspect of our lives. But if you look at National Fives, we've reduced the attainment gap by a third. At level 6, we've reduced it by a fifth. More young people are going from deprived communities are going to university than was the case 5 years ago. But I want us to do more. I want us to do better. We've made progress, and if we're re-elected, we'll continue that forward progress that we've already started.
So you could have done better in education. You took your eye off the ball in drugs deaths, hospitals opening years late, failing to meet waiting times. It's not a great record to take into this election, is it?
I obviously don't agree with that characterisation of it.
But you can't disagree with any of those things. These are things you've said.
People have a choice, and they've got a choice on May the 6th, whether they want a First Minister and a candidate for First Minister to sit and arrogantly say, no, we've done absolutely everything perfectly, there's no room for improvement, there's not more that we want to do, or whether they want a First Minister who says, do you know what, I'm really proud of our record, but here's the areas where I want us to do even better, and this is what we're going to do better, and people will make that choice.
On the economy, you say in your manifesto that you'll set out in the first 6 months of the Parliament a new 10-year strategy for economic transformation. You don't have one for recovery yet, then?
Well, you know, the Benny Higgins review that took place last year that has already put in place a strategy that, for example, put forward the recommendation which is already being implemented for the young person's guarantee, giving every young person between 16 and 24...
So why do you need a 10-year strategy for recovery if you've already got that?
Others could decide we don't need a 10-year, but it's actually a good thing to look ahead. We have recovery from the pandemic. We've got the imperative to meet net zero, the green transition, which is a big obligation, but a massive opportunity as well. So we are, I think, doing the right thing, saying that we're going to bring businesses, trade unions, academic experts together to look ahead and say what are the goals we want to achieve as a country over the next 10 years and how do we go about doing that. So, you know, some people would say that's not necessary. I think it is necessary, and I think it will be a fantastic opportunity.
In the last Parliament, you lost 2 ministers to sleaze. You were embroiled in court cases. Why should the people of Scotland trust you to be the government?
Because I think we've got a good record. I think we've done a good job for Scotland, and I think
we have done better, you just admitted.
Well, I think any government that's been candidate will say we've done well here, but because of circumstances we could have done better here. I think actually that's the kind of approach people want to see. But why should people trust the SNP was your question. Firstly, because I think we've demonstrated over the last year we're the government with the commitment and the experience to lead the country through the pandemic. We've put forward a bold programme for government to kickstart our recovery. And yes, we want to give people in Scotland the choice over the country's future once the pandemic has passed. And, you know, that's what I'm asking people to put their trust in on May the 6th.
And yet your party has split over the last year or so. How can you claim that you could lead the country to a united Scotland as an independent when you can't even keep your own movement united?
Well, do you know what? I think if you look not just at the headline of opinion polls, and I appreciate opinion polls are not what counts, the election results are what count, but if you look not just at the headlines of the opinion polls, but at the underlying statistics, what you see is SNP support is strong, it's very united, and you know, while I take
split, though. You must be disappointed that it's split on your watch.
The SNP hasn't split. We have had some people decide, actually a relatively small number of people decide to support another party. That is their right, and I, you know, respect their right to do that. But I think to say the SNP is split is a massive overstatement. If you look at the opinion polls, and we'll see what the election result has to say, I take nothing for granted. But what's interesting, and this was obvious in the debate you so expertly chaired last week, Colin, was that all of the other parties in this election are vying to be leader of the opposition. It is only me and the SNP that's putting forward a serious programme to be the government, and that's what the country needs in this serious times.
And I'm going to have to stop you there, Nicola Sturgeon. Thanks for joining us in Scotland tonight.